That's all they have to do.
I don't care as long as my hair looks okay.
It looks really nice.
Okay, just another
long as
30
I have
seconds
hair.
or so.
Oh, mine needs cutting, but
Oh, you look beautiful. Do we have
Oh,
to sign a waiver?
yeah.
Oh, the lawyer.
To have your picture?
All right. We are live,
Hi,
ladies and
Eileen.
gentlemen.
Oh, it even came up on my thing. Watch now.
Hi, Eileen.
Oh,
Oh, you look beautiful. Do we have to sign a waiver?
No. Me telling you for the record on the air that you're on the air is enough for you to know.
That's fine.
Okay, we still have people jumping in. Okay.
oh, big
I'm
All right,
getting
group.
Cheryl, Frida,
feedback
and Sid
because I'm
come in.
hearing it on Facebook at the same time.
Me telling you for the record
Actually
on
live.
the air that you're
Uh-oh.
on the air.
Somebody's talking.
No, because you're going to hear it on Facebook in the background.
Oh,
I
yeah,
can't.
that's what I
I'm
hear
getting an
background.
echo because it's
Yeah,
coming through
that
on
was
Facebook.
probably mine. So now it's off. So we're okay. All right. So good afternoon, everybody.
Good
We
afternoon.
are looking at Parashat Vayeshev this week. Vayeshev obviously always occurs right around Hanukkah time, and there's a lot of overlap between the story of Joseph and his brothers and the story of Hanukkah, but we're not going to get into that today. But we are, of course, talking about Joseph. So I'm going to pull up our source sheet and we can get started. It was sent to you in your email as well, if that's easier for you.
Yeah.
And let me just, nope, that's not the one. That's not the one. Oh, come on, source sheet. You are here. One moment, please. Maybe I closed it.
We can send it to you.
You know what? I might just, no, there it is. Okay. That would be a new, I don't know, high or low, but that'd be something.
No.
Okay, I was going to increase the size and then pull it up for everybody. I've been involved with CJA's lobbying day today on Queens Park, at my computer. So that's been a very, I've done it before. It's always an interesting experience, and who knows what and what their thoughts are. Okay. Here we go. Okay, we can all see this?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay.
Yep.
So, Parshat Vayeshev. V'yiru echav ki oto ahav avihem mikol echav v'yisneu oto v'lo yachlu dabro l'shalom. And when his brothers saw, that's Joseph's brothers saw, that their father loved him more than any of his brothers, they hated him, so that they could not speak a friendly word to him. Okay? So that's the way our English translation goes. In the Hebrew, it's important to notice v'lo yachlu dabro l'shalom. So first of all, dabro is a very interesting construct in Hebrew. Rashi actually does address it, as do others, but we're not going to look at that. But dabro l'shalom. They couldn't say something friendly is the translation we have. They couldn't say something peaceable to him, perhaps. But what does this possibly mean? And do we take this negatively or positively? I'm only working with one screen today, so I can't see all of you one time. So do we think this is something nice about the brothers or something not nice about the brothers?
Not nice.
I think we can take.
Oh, this is divisive.
Who's going to go first? Let's pick straws.
Okay, who thinks it's nice?
I think it's okay.
Okay, tell me more. Why do you think it's an okay thing to say about the brothers? It sounds like Jeff.
It's sort of that thing that when you're growing up, your parents say, if you have nothing nice to say about someone, don't say it at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think they're following that lesson.
Okay, so maybe they didn't speak to him at all.
Yeah.
Because it says they didn't say something shalom related to him. Maybe they said a bunch of other things to him that weren't shalom related. We don't know.
It particularly says not a friendly word. I think friendly is the operative word there.
Right. So friendly is the way that this translator chose to translate dabro l'shalom, which we're going to see later. Other people do it other ways. But yeah, I think that what you're saying is that he's interpreting they didn't have a friendly word. Maybe they had a bunch of unfriendly words.
I liked your use of peaceable.
Okay, because it plays well into peace, into shalom.
Shalom, yes.
Anyone have another take on this, which we haven't said yet?
Well, I wonder if we could look at the Hebrew for hated.
Oh, vayisnu? Yeah, that would be, I think everyone would translate it that way. They hated him.
So you would agree with that translation?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think there's another way to translate that.
Okay.
Okay, so let's, yeah.
It's hard to see how that could be considered to be a good thing. I mean, these are brothers. The expectation would be that they love each other. And so I don't know that the translation could be other than something that's not a good thing.
And I think, the way I certainly the way I read on a pshat level, on a sort of contextual level, is exactly like that. They hated him. They couldn't say a single nice word to him.
Yeah.
Right? And which is critical. But then comes in Rashi. Now he's quoting from the Midrash, from Genesis Rabbah, from Bereshit Rabbah, and he reads this in a remarkably favorable way to the brothers. So v'lo yachlu dabro l'shalom. From what is stated to their discredit, we may infer something to their credit. They did not speak one thing with their mouth, having another thing quite different in their hearts. Okay.
Can I say something also?
Yes, go ahead.
Maybe because the father liked Yosef more than the rest, maybe they could not say a nice thing to the father also.
So it's interesting. So who is Dabra referring to, right?
Yeah.
Is Dabra Joseph or is Dabra the father?
Right.
Certainly, I think that the most classic reading of this is Joseph, but it's interesting, actually, particularly something we're going to see later on, where for your real grammar people, I'm trying to remember who it is. It's not the Rashbam. Notes that the suffixal vav actually refers both to a person and to an object, which is fast. It doesn't happen very often, but in the he feel form, he says it can happen. So if you followed what I just said, you've now passed first year Hebrew grammar in rabbinical school. Okay?
Not a word.
Okay. Okay. So what is Rashi saying? What Rashi's quoting the Midrash here? He's saying what is stated to their discredit, right? Mitoch gnutam lamanu shivcham. So something which really is to their discredit. He's saying on the contextual level, this is actually saying something negative about them, that they're not talking nicely to Joseph. But actually, we can read this differently. We can say this is actually something to their credit, to their shavach. It's good for them. It's nice for them. That is, it's not like they said to him, "Oh, good morning, Joseph. How are you today? Oh, that's so lovely." Well, in their head, they were thinking, "I want to throw you in a pit until you die." Right? They were saying what was truthful to them. They were speaking authentically. And that's actually a skill, right? And we don't like people who say one thing and think another, at least most of the time. Maybe there's time for that, and genteel conversation in and out. So my question to begin with is, when's the last time you were actually very aware that you wanted to say something positive, but there really was some criticism that you needed to share, and it was maybe hard, but you did that? Or the other way, you wanted to say something mean, but as it turns out, you actually like the person, you said something nice against your character.
I think that there's a different approach when it comes to family.
Okay, keep going.
I think that family is different from a neighbor or a friend or something or somebody else. I think that families, brothers and sisters, should have each other's back, and they should be. You don't have to like a person, your brother or sister. Maybe you don't like the kind of person they are, but I think that you have to love them because they're your flesh and blood.
Interesting.
Rabbi.
Arnie, yes.
This is Bruegges.
Yeah. This is third generation Broigus.
Yeah.
You would think that after Isaac and Ishmael and Jacob and Esau, they would have figured this one out by now. But yet another generation, Jacob doesn't step in and say, whoa, 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 everyone get along. And the verse right before this one is Jacob gives Joseph the Keturah Rapasim, right? The
Coat of many colors.
multicolored dream coat.
Yeah.
Right? Jacob didn't understand the lesson from his own life or from his father's life, clearly.
But also they learned it from one generation to another. It's what they saw. They didn't
Yeah.
they didn't learn from it.
Right.
But
The
they learned
children, yeah. I mean, they saw how their father, they may have seen how their father lied to his brother and said, I'll follow you. And then he didn't.
Well, I think we need to peel a few layers of onion back here. And I hesitate a little because I'm an only child. And when my three children would get into arguments with each other, and my dear wife Gilda and I would look and try and prevent it, they would all turn on us because she's also an only child, and they all three would say to us, what do you know about sibling rivalry? They would say, you only read it in a book. So, but I'm going to speculate anyway. There are what, 12 brothers, and they are from different mothers.
Yeah. Four mothers, 12 boys.
Right. And a girl.
And remember, among the mothers, there was a favorite
Yes.
wife, a less favored wife, and 2 concubines.
Exactly. And one has to picture, I think, what the state of affairs was as they were growing up. And I think that has to be taken into account in order to come to some idea of what was actually going on in this quite large family of origin. If I can
and Joseph's also, he's the boy chick here, right? He's the young guy.
Yes, he is the young guy, and the other aspect to this, which I think is also important, is that we must remember, and I can't obviously speak for everybody, but I certainly know Jewish families in which there are siblings who haven't spoken to each other in 30 or 40 years.
What?
So, oh yes.
I'm being sarcastic.
So when I don't remember who it was, Randy maybe, who said there has to be love there at the basis. Well, there isn't always.
It was Gidi.
So who was it?
Gidi.
Okay. So, I think we have to be realistic. There is no reason to think that what we experience and what we see around us today was any different back then.
And I'll, of course, certainly I don't think families have changed substantively, but also, I've heard from families where they have, to this day, bad feelings towards a particular sibling because of a special relationship that sibling had with the parent, or more importantly, the special relationship the parent had with that child. Right? That the rest of the kids felt not as loved, and it was obvious to them who the favorite child was.
That's sad.
Cause problems.
Yeah, that's very sad.
It could also be perceived.
Yeah, look, I don't know, I wasn't there, but I've heard, because I talk with a lot of families, this comes up. Okay, so let's go on. Rabbeinu Bachya comes later than Rashi, so he's certainly familiar with what Rashi has to say. And he writes, okay, V'lo yachlu daber l'shalom. This is actually a positive aspect of their characters. Instead of hiding their hostility and flattering Joseph, they were straightforward in revealing their feelings toward him. Okay, so quoting the same midrash, right? Same as Rashi. And then he goes further. Yeah.
But they didn't necessarily show their feelings. I mean, what it says is they didn't talk to him. It wasn't like they tried to work it out. They just didn't talk to him.
Well, they didn't say good things.
No,
So
they
don't
didn't say
know
nice
exactly
things. Right.
what they may have said or may not have said. But the assumption from here is that, look, not talking to someone is hostile.
Yeah.
Right. So that was clear. But what's interesting to me about Rabbeinu Bachya is the next part. We find this characteristic praised by Solomon. So he's not just saying, okay, we're reading into this, but actually there's basis in our own text, in our own Tanakh, for being straightforward like this. So he quotes from Mishlei, Proverbs traditionally ascribed to Solomon, where Mishlei says, a man who flatters his neighbor actually spreads a net for his feet. Right? So if you're saying something nice when you're actually supposed to be saying something a little bit more challenging, if you're flattering instead of criticizing when you should be criticizing, you're spreading a net. You're catching him in some way. You're entrapping him.
You're going to trip him up.
You're going to trip him.
Yeah.
That's a nice way to put it.
Yeah.
You're going to trip him up. So there is something about being straightforward. In addition to the notion of tocha, we actually have a positive mitzvah of rebuke, which is another which is another mitzvah that we can talk about another time. And then he says the prophet actually compliments Avshalom when he said, and Avshalom did not speak to Amnon either friendly or unfriendly words, for Avshalom hated Amnon, who had raped his sister. Okay, so there seems to be, okay, if you hate someone, don't talk to them. Like, that's okay.
So that's back to what Jeff said, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have something nice to say,
Don't say it.
Yeah.
And we find that in Tanakh in a couple places. And so they're saying, great, the brothers actually acted appropriately. And it's actually not, and it's not even commenting on whether their hatred was justified. Because by many accounts, yeah, it was. Right? Anyway. So Ibn Ezra, who we saw a bit last week, and his ongoing arguments with Rashbam, he has two words of commentary here: l'shalom, afilu l'shalom. They couldn't double l'shalom. They couldn't even say the word again, or l'shalom, shalom, right? Which is an interesting read. Like, I don't know when shalom came into use as sort of hello, goodbye. That'd be an interesting study to make. But certainly the way that I understand Ibn Ezra, it's that same general idea. They couldn't even wish him well on his travels. They couldn't. I'm going to do what I like doing because I like having power if I can figure it out. I'm going to mute everybody. And if you want to talk, you should unmute yourself. Okay, there we go. So again, if you want to comment, please feel free to do so and just unmute yourself. You can just, and if you want to do it temporarily, just hold down the space bar and talk, and then you can let go and you'll go back to mute automatically.
So I think that that kind of hate, or not talking to each other among siblings, is very painful. It's very painful, not just to the one who's excluded, but to the ones who are excluding. I've seen that in my own family, not my children, thank God, not me, but with my parents' generation. It's very painful. And if it doesn't get resolved, well, we know this story, but if it doesn't get resolved, it's really not a good situation. I mean, I don't see it as a positive at all.
Yeah.
I also think it's very difficult for the children. The parents might not be talking to their siblings, but these people are aunts and uncles or cousins, and it's confusing as to what they're supposed to do. So, some people will take on what the parents are doing, some want to do the other, but now the kids are in conflict too.
I really feel that these brothers are not being held up to a high enough standard. It's Risa Clareman speaking. I think that it almost feels to me as if the commentators are trying to make excuses for these brothers who are going to end up as our, progenitors, as our forefathers. So, but I really have a problem with this, and I also think it's cowardly because they don't. First of all, they're a lot older than he is, and there's presumably more mature. And what they should have really done was gone together and spoken to their father, which they didn't do. And I think you can see that I suppose you could say there's progress because they've progressed past Cain and Abel. But I can't see, I really think it's kind of picking at straws, honestly, to say, although I agree you're better to not to be a hypocrite, I don't think that this is a good thing.
So what's fascinating here to me is that the argument you're making, Risa, is actually exact opposite of what we were talking about last week. And that's not to say you're wrong, because I think you're right here. Last week we were talking about how it made us uncomfortable that in the rabbinic midrashic tradition they turned Esav into from someone who like seemed to have good intention and was happy to see his brother after so many years, and into someone who was terrible and awful and progenitor of Rome and wants to slaughter all the Jews, right? Whereas this week we're saying, no, something on the surface is actually bad, and the rabbis are going their way to defend it, saying, oh, it's not so bad. They didn't say
Yes,
nice to them. It's the opposite. And so it's interesting to me how we got there, but also it reminded me, I couldn't remember the name of the book, and I finally figured it out that I mentioned. The book is by Carol Bacchus. It's called, it's not about Esav, it's about Ishmael. It's called Ishmael on the Border, Rabbinic Portrayals of the First Arab. So if you're really interested in how the rabbinic tradition turned Ishmael from the hapless brother to the enemy, in rabbinic literature, this is a great book. Okay, I'd be happy to share with you. I think it's about $40 on Amazon and maybe on back order right now.
Okay, thank you. Well, but it is interesting, isn't it, Rabbi? Because they're very selective about, they make decisions. These commentators are making decisions on how they want to portray these people. They've made a decision on who's good, and they've made a decision on who's bad, and they decided. So that's what you're saying, which is very interesting.
Or Rashi's trying to teach a lesson here.
Okay.
And he's looking for a space to do so.
We also have to remember that the commentators know what happened next. They already know that.
They read to the end of the book already.
They read to the end of the book. And they not only know that, but they know about the differences ultimately among the tribes when the Israelites get to the land and occupy various sections of the land. And they can go even further than that, and they know about the differences between the two kingdoms. So I think that they may be, some of their comments are taking all of that future knowledge, if I can put it that way, into account.
Yeah, and soft, they're commenting on Jews, right? They're not commenting on Esav and Ishmael, who are outside of the circle. They're commenting on people who are inside the circle, people who may not be behaving well, but who are part of us. And that might affect their decision of how they're going to portray them. So I think it's all of that. It's how it affects them. I think Rashi does want to teach a lesson here. Breshit Rabbah here, I imagine it's on this pasuk. It's not like he's taken from somewhere else. So he's just looking at the midrash and saying, what can I find interesting to say? Oh, this midrash, I like it. I'm going to put it here. The Talmud has been described as, or the Mishnah has been described as sort of the index, the organizing principle for pre-existing conversations. That is to say, sometimes in Jewish life, and this is true for rabbis, there are things that exist and we want to share, and we're just finding the right entry point, right? So in the Talmud, it's something we could connect it to this Mishnah, even though it's nothing to do with this Mishnah. So it'll be in the text afterwards, in that sugya and that Gemara, or it could be for a sermon. Like, I know I want to talk this week about whatever it might be, and I have to find something in the parsha, a hook to get me there. And so maybe there's a little bit of that here too. And by the way, I actually do think I know what I want to talk about this week. And I'm still looking for a hook of how to get me there. Okay, so moving on. I want to focus now more about the conflict, more about the brothers and Joseph, and the role of the coat in all this, the tunic. The Ketuna HaPasim is mentioned twice up to this point. First, it's mentioned in the third verse of our parsha, the verse that came right before the verse we just looked at. Now Israel, that is Jacob, loved Joseph best of all sons, for he was a child of his old age, and he made him an ornamented tunic. Okay, so Rashi does comment on that verse to tell us a little bit about what is a Ketonat Pasim. So we know, because it hasn't come up yet in the Torah, doesn't really come up anywhere else, so he wants to describe it a bit to us. Then it comes up 20 verses later. When Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the ornamented tunic that he was wearing. Okay. So if you are a careful reader of the text, what might jump out at you right away? If you're a not so careful reader of the text, what might seem extraneous to you?
That he says tunic twice.
Yeah.
His tunic, the ornamented tunic. We already know that that's the same.
It wasn't so long ago that we talked about this tunic. It's the same term, kutanto and katonet. It's the same word. It could have stopped at the first mention of the tunic. They stripped Joseph of his tunic or even the tunic, right? But the Torah chooses, we'll use that kind of language. Often when I talk about the Torah, you'll notice I talk to Torah as if it has agency, like the Torah says, or the Torah chooses, or the Torah thinks about this, because it's sort of the most neutral term I can use. Right, so I don't say God, because maybe if you don't think that way, or the editor of the Torah, if you don't think, don't think that way, it's just the Torah itself. And this jumps out at people, right? If you're a close reader of the text, you're going to wonder, this seems extraneous. And if you're most commentators who follow the school of Rabbi Akiva, that everything in there has purpose, you can learn something from every word, phrase, even every jot and tittle, as they say. Okay. So Rashi comes in and he says, this was the garment that his father had given him additional to those of his brothers. Okay, so now we learn something about the garment. That is, all the brothers got some clothing from their father. Joseph got extra clothing or extra special clothing. How does this fit in here? What's Rashi, what's his intention in sharing this once again from Breshit Rabbah?
That's why they were jealous, or that's part of why they were jealous.
Yeah, I think part of why it kind of takes on the symbol for their jealousy.
Yeah, this is what prompts the violence, right? Because right after this, they throw it off, right? The pit, the blood, they send it back to his father. So this object becomes very important to the story. So it's brought back to the forefront, it seems, from Rashi's read.
Right. If they strip him of the garment, it is as though they are stripping him of his special status.
Yes. I think that that's a very good read here. You are not better than us, and we're going to let you know that by removing the thing which signifies that. And in fact, turning that into the thing which is going to make you less than us because it's going to make you thought to be dead. Right? Okay.
Or at least
The thing,
naked.
Rabbi, is that this ornamental tunic was one of a kind.
Yeah, certainly one of a kind. His father was a good designer tailor in addition to everything else. Anyone want to speak personally about parental favoritism and particularly with respect to gift giving?
For me, if he's wearing fancy clothes, he's not working with his brothers.
Oh, we know he's not working with his brothers, right?
And it's special status. It's his status this represents.
Yeah, we know he's not in the field because that right before that, I think it is, he's sent out into the field to go find his brothers. And the guy without a name, Ploni Almoni sends him, oh, I saw them over there. So he's actually this key character in the whole Torah. If he weren't there and Joseph doesn't find his brothers, the Torah, that's the end. Joseph goes back to Jacob saying, couldn't find them, right? And here's this nameless guy. Okay, so this is Rashi's read on the text. And so anyone gift stories? We're all pretty good about, equals.
I'm so careful. I'm so careful about trying to do everything the same that I remember it's not clothes, but I remember once my daughters were in a little bit of a fight and they were arguing and I said something about, okay, now you're even. And my little one said, my youngest one said, you know what? I don't want to be even all the time. Like make me special,
And there's, how do you do that while also not bringing jealousy from the others? It's tough. And my grandfather, who passed away over the summer, this is something which I spoke about in his eulogy. This was really important to him. Like if one person got a penny, everyone got a penny. Like it was even Stephen, even though like it was clear some grandchildren called him more than others. It was all equal in the end.
Fair and equal. Well, can I say something?
Yeah, please go.
I think fair and equal are not synonyms, and we have to be careful not to confuse the two. Very often you give more to one child because there's a need.
Yes.
And so in this case, I think he was a dreamer. He was. I mean, he was walking around telling his brother his dreams. And I think he was not of the land, he was of the mind. And I think this is another kind of divide between the brothers and him, that they probably didn't know how to relate to him.
Yeah.
Is there at any time a discussion among?
Sorry, is someone speaking? Get to speak up. I can't see or hear you, but I hear you a little bit.
It's Sue Friedman. Is there at any time where there is a discussion in this segment that explains the feelings of both sides?
Not really. Just the beginning, the brothers hated him. Joseph just seems mostly clueless. I mean, he seems like a 17-year-old kid who just can't read people.
Well, it seems to me that there's a total disconnect in relationship, not just in their behavior, but also in their connection verbally.
Yeah. Yeah, and we really don't have, aside from this one scene, there's not a lot of scenes with him and his brothers before he sold off into slavery. Right? There's no sense that they're, hanging out playing soccer at any point. Okay, so let's go past Rashi. So looking at the Rashbam, so he picks up on the same thing. Why is it mentioned here at all? It seems extraneous. And he says, some say that this is mentioned here only because it was the original cause for the hatred. That is to say, Rashi, right? He's talking about Rashi without saying Rashi. This is not the case. Instead, it says it below, they had the ornamented tunic taken to their father to mislead him so that he would think mentally that a savage beast devoured him. As it says, he recognizes it and said, my son's tunic. For that reason, it mentions it here. So the Rashbam is giving a different thing, which we actually mentioned. It comes up again, not as an explanation of the hatred, but rather because it's an important piece of the story without which the story doesn't make so much sense. Right? We're clarifying, we're bringing it back in, just like a newspaper article, a long piece of journalism will remind us what someone's job is, right? If they haven't talked about them in a few pages because it's relevant at that point, it's relevant not to understand the hatred, it's relevant moving forward. So that was Rashbam there. Okay. Any thoughts on that? I think it's not so much for me there.
Yeah, I think that's true. The coat is part of the plot, but also in bringing the coat back to the father, who had given it to his favorite, quote unquote, son, and it was special and no one else among the siblings had anything like it, and they bring it back to him and they have put blood, animal blood on it. My first thought about that is how cruel it was to the father and what lay behind them doing that. In other words, they didn't have to bring the coat covered with blood back to the father. They could have just said something verbally, but by bringing that coat and confronting the father with the coat, it was doing something really nasty.
Yeah, really, really nasty. Not just your kid is dead. The very thing which signified your special relationship with that kid is the sign of the thing, is the sign of his very death. Good read. Okay, so now we're going to jump ahead a few chapters to chapter 40 in Genesis, still within our parsha. Right after everything that has passed, sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt gave offense their lord, the king of Egypt. Okay, so Joseph is already in prison because of his exchange with Potiphar, and we learned that the cupbearer and the baker did something which upset the king. Pharaoh was angry at his 2 courtiers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and put them in custody in the house of chief steward in the same prison house where Joseph was confined. The chief steward assigned Joseph to them, and he attended them. When they had been in custody for some time, by the way, that's a line we always forget, that Joseph was assigned to them, right? That he was like, because they were high-ranking officials, they still had a servant within prison, and their servant was Joseph. When they'd been in custody for some time, both of them, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined to the prison, dreamed in the same night, each his own dream, and each dream with its own meaning. When Joseph came to them in the morning, he saw that they were distraught. Vayar otam v'hinam zoafim, and that's going to be our key line. Okay, he saw them. He saw that they were distraught. He asked Pharaoh's courtiers, who were with him in custody in his master's house, saying, "Why do you appear downcast today?" And they said to him, "We had dreams, and there's no one to interpret them." So Joseph said to them, "Surely God can interpret. Tell me your dreams." Okay. So first of all, anything jump out at you of interest?
Yeah, he doesn't say I can interpret. He says God can interpret. So
Right.
I'm God's shaliach.
Yes. Anything else? Okay. So instead of starting,
Yeah. What is the nature of the cupbearer and the baker's dreams? That's not disclosed, I don't think.
so that's disclosed a little bit later, right? That's the skinny cows and the thin cows and the. Sorry, that's a Joseph dream. It's the birds coming and landing on the food on the head and taking it, and that it comes up right after. Like that's the continuation of the story. Tell me your dreams, and they tell them. I left it off because it wasn't so pertinent to what we were talking about. But read the rest of Genesis 40 and you'll see. So we're going to finish with Rashi here, and instead start with Radak. And they're all looking at this Vayarotam v'hinam zofim. He saw that they were distraught, or he saw them and they were distraught. I think is actually a better translation. He saw them and they were distraught, right? And behold, they were distraught, something like that. Okay. So Radak looks at this and he says, each one of them was deeply upset about the dream he had had, as they could not figure out its significance. Okay. I mean, the first question is, why are they distraught? They had dreams. Maybe they thought there could have been good dreams, which actually we're going to see in a second, or they couldn't understand them. You know, who knows what this is? So we're actually curious as to why they're experiencing this emotion. And so Radak jumps in and saying, okay, they were upset because they didn't understand them. And when you don't understand something, that can be very upsetting. But Chizkuni comments here as well, v'hinam zofim, and they look very distraught, distressed. And what does he say? As they consider themselves innocent in accordance with their dreams. They did not understand why they were still in jail and considered appealing to Pharaoh, who might have forgotten about them. This caused their distress. So Chizkuni says something else entirely. That is, they actually could, or they thought they could interpret their dreams, and they thought, both of them, that their dreams said about them that they were innocent. And if they're innocent, and their innocence is known from their dreams, why are they still in prison? Well, according to Chizkuni, they were worried that Pharaoh forgot them. And that's what was upsetting.
But wouldn't they have known if they were innocent or not? They wouldn't know until they dreamt it? And that seems a little...
Or innocent in the eyes of Pharaoh, let's say.
Okay.
Because what they did it wasn't like they committed a crime. They did something that upset him. Right? We don't know what it is. You know, could have been anything.
I think this is rather far-fetched myself.
That's one of my favorite Yiddish words. It's far-fetched. No joke, no laugh? Okay.
No.
So
Why
let's go on.
Me ken quetschen and me ken farquetschen euch.
No, unfortunately, my Yiddish is limited to far-fetched. Okay, so then we have the Orach Chaim, and he brings in the Talmud in Brachot 55, and they were distressed. According to our sages in Brachot 55, the reason that both of them were distressed was that they both dreamt the meaning of the other's dream. Right? And this is something like Wow. And we're not going to go through all the proofs and how they get there. The chief butler was distressed, having seen in his dream what was going to happen to his companion, the chief baker. That is, it's not going to end well for the baker. He's going to be executed. Whereas the chief baker had seen in his dream that the chief butler would be reinstated. He had nonetheless prepared himself for adversity and could not bring himself to have peace of mind. Okay, so they were distressed because they knew what was going to happen to the other person. And it's an interesting piece of sort of human psychology that Or Chaim is saying. Okay, we understand if your friend who's with you in prison, you see that he's going to be executed, that's going to be distressing. But believing that your friend who is with you in prison is going to be returned to his position from before, and that's also disconcerting to you because you are prepared for some sort of adversity or what have you, that you're both going to still be, you're both going to return to fair, and that's going to be a problem. It says something about what we think about others, even in their successes. But it's 3 different takes on why they were distressed. So it's just one example I wanted to bring it. The Torah gives us an emotion and then wants to figure out where is this emotion coming from. And so they're delving into the story and trying to figure it out. I wanted to point out before we do the final Rashi, these are obviously hyperlinks, and these are linking to, actually, I'm not sure if these links are going to work the way it's set up through the PDF, to the text themselves. But I got a lot of these texts come from a website called Sefaria. So I wanted to share that with you in case you ever wanted to, look at some of this by yourself, because it's really good stuff. So I'm going to pull up Sefaria right now and just give you a sense of what the website looks like, because it's really a phenomenal website. So many tabs open. There we go. Okay. Okay, you see it? Yes? Can someone say yes?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see.
Looks good.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is sefaria.org, sefaria.org, right? From Sefer, book. And it has a tremendous amount of Jewish text online. And it's not just text, it's online, it's hyperlinked, linked within each other. So with the verse that we're looking at, right? So this is Genesis 40, verse 8. We had dreams, surely God can dream, etc. Or we were looking just at 2 before that, number 6, right? They were distraught. Okay, so you click on that. First of all, you click on any word and get a translation, and like a detailed translation. You can look at the resources that are connected to this. So commentaries on it, where else similarly it exists in Tanakh. So we'll actually look at that and look on. The chief officer said to Daniel, and so sometimes because this is done automatically doesn't work so well, but there's linguistic similarities between these two. Targum, that's the Aramaic translations. The Midrash on it, Musar, which is sort of the Jewish ethical, philosophical tradition. And then where it appears in people's source sheets that they've saved and uploaded to Sefaria, web pages, topics, and more. Commentary, what happens, you click on commentary, and it shows you there are 9 comments on this from all the commentators that they have. And they have a lot of commentators. So you can see Rashi has 1 comment, Ibn Ezra has 2. All these other commentators have nothing. Chizkuni has 1, etc. If it has the EN here, it means it's available both in Hebrew and in English. So I've set it right now for Hebrew English. Right, so this is the text we looked at in the English, and you could also get it in the Hebrew. All at your fingertips, all for free. Great, great stuff. So if you really want to study the Parsha, or you're curious about something, this is an easy way to do it. Not everything's in English, but a fair amount is.
Who is responsible for doing this, Rabbi?
This organization called Sefaria. They're pretty new. I mean, we're talking last 3 years, 4 years they came up, and they keep on evolving, doing more great stuff. I happen to know someone who works there. They are a 501c3 in the United States. And they're great.
What does that mean? 501?
They're a registered charity in the United States.
How does it compare to Al HaTorah?
I don't use Al HaTorah, so I can't really tell you. I've seen it, but I don't use it regularly.
I was going to say they have an app, so you can download it to your phone.
Yes, they have an app, and they're constantly adding more and more texts. So I mean, you can just look at the very beginning in terms of options.
It's the Jewish Google.
Jewish Google, yeah. I mean, and there's a search function. So sometimes, so actually, just the other day, a friend of mine who's a writer wanted to know the origin of a certain Aramaic phrase. So there's a lot of ways to do it. And one thing I did, I put into this search box and see what came up and see what came first chronologically. Turns out the phrase actually evolved over time and it originally from the Talmud in slightly different wording. But anyway, and then gives you, if you want to study something every single day or every single week, you know, they set it up for you. There's a it's standardized. You can look at certain topics and they'll give you source sheets and other things on that. Visualizations are interesting. It's great, and they continue to grow and grow and grow. So I encourage you to explore. But back to our source sheets to finish us off. Okay. So Rashi says something what seems like simple. He says Zoafim atzevim. What does Zoafim mean? It means they were sad. Similar to the way it's used in Kings or in Micha, where Zaef or this root, the Shoresh, is used the same way, which actually has a pretty wide way in which it's used within the Tanakh. Okay. What I think is particularly interesting, and it's not necessarily brought out in these commentators, is the way that the Torah presents us this information. It's Vayar otam vehinam zoafim. He sees them and behold, they are sad. The important part for me there is he sees them, right? You know, how many times do we not see other people? That is, you know, a builder walks by a building and immediately notices the construction materials and whether it's built well or not. An interior designer walks in to a home or office and immediately notices the furniture and if they're well constructed and beautiful and they match the carpet. Joseph, the argument goes, encounters these two people, he's their servant, and he sees them because Joseph sees people and he intuited from them that they were sad. And so the question is, you know, to what extent are you or can you be observant of somebody else and thereby help them? Because if he didn't notice they were sad, they would not have volunteered this dream thing to him. And the story would have been very different, perhaps.
This also raises an interesting question. Why didn't Joseph see that his brothers were upset and jealous of him?
Yeah, because he was a stupid kid. He was a selfish, kid who looked at himself and tried to raise himself up. Come, boys, I had a dream. Let me tell you how special I am. Everyone worships me in my dream, right? By the time he has seen the world, so to speak, right, and seen what things are really like, look at Potiphar and his wife, for example, he grows. He matures. Is there anything that any of you tend to notice that other people don't? Or do you know anyone who has a tremendous EQ and it's always amazing to you that they pick up on things?
Oops.
It seems to me that who is the servant, Joseph, in the prison, that these older, more established people would come to him to talk to. I caught that, Rabbi.
Yeah, no, I know I heard you and I yelled. It wasn't about you. Look, obviously over the time they were sharing the prison together, they grew to trust him to some extent. But sometimes, it's the question, when someone really looks in the eye and say, really, actually tell me how you're doing today. It opens up that space, not, oh, how you doing today? And say, everything's great. How are you? Fine. Okay, good. Have a good day. But you look at them in the eye and say, what's going on? They don't have to be someone who is on your level or superior, whatever. They can be somebody else. And that might just be the space needed to share.
Sometimes it's even better with somebody you don't know as well. Sometimes it's easier when you don't know them as well to share.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Anyone else? Final comments, thoughts?
Rabbi, it's Ron Hoffman.
Hi, Ron.
Hi, how are you? How's everybody?
Are you really asking, or are you just throwaway asking?
No, that's the whole point. But it has to be one at a time. I remember Rabbi Saltzman telling a story about when he was greeting everybody as they left synagogue. And he would make a point once in a while when people were saying, hi, Rabbi, how are you? To say something negative. And people would just say, well, that's great, and walk by, not having even heard what he had to say. Now, I didn't think that that was a very nice thing to do at the end of a service because, picking on people when they're looking for just shaking hands and saying, I'm glad I'm here today and so forth. But having said that, I mean, that's, I think, raising a very standard response issue, people not seeing and listening to other people. And I think that this is probably a lesson around emotional antenna and how you have to grow into it, but how it's important to grow into it. Otherwise, you're not going to become Joseph, who's second in command in Egypt. You're going to become a Joseph who remains in prison.
Yes, and Joseph is their servant. And so he could have been just pro forma, right? And how are you? Oh, I'm okay also. But he was going beyond that. As is often the case in the Torah, it's very spare. What we are told is very sparing. And so we have to search out the text. And of course, that's what the commentators are doing in addition to other things. But yes, he certainly has grown from the time he was the favored kid, the favored son, the youngest, to where he is now. And of course, we remember the various episodes that he goes through, from being thrown into the pit and being sold into slavery and the whole Potiphar incident and all of that. So this is an indication to us that he has become a much more sensitive human being.
So on that note, I'm going to give you some homework. Okay, I know you didn't think there was homework in this class. And the homework is like this. Today, I want you to really see somebody. It doesn't have to be a physical seeing. That is not so easy these days. But who in your life are you going to choose to see today, to really see? And what are you going to do about it? I'll tell you, and I'm not trying to like raise myself up, but like when I was preparing some of this material earlier this week, I was thinking about this and I realized there's someone who I usually see, but because of COVID, I haven't seen this person for a long time. And while I communicate a lot with many, this is someone from work, while I communicate with a lot of people from the office fairly regularly, just because the nature of our roles, there's one person I don't tend to just call or email too often. And I made a point of reaching out and just saying, haven't seen you, haven't talked to you for a bit. Really tell me how you're doing. I'd like to hear from you. And from her response, it seems like it made a difference in her life. And that's my hope, what some of these commentators do for all of us. It's not just interesting. It's not just filling in the gaps of the text. Ultimately, Judaism isn't just something we think about, it's something that we do. And I hope that this gives you something to do today, especially because I think a lot of you don't have enough to do these days. I will see
Yashkoach,
you all
Rabbi.
next week when
Thank
we.
you.
Pardon?
I said thank you.
You're very
Yeah,
welcome.
yes, you're cool, Rabbi.
Chag Sameach to everybody.
Chag
Yes.
Purim Sameach, everyone.
What's the
We
mayor?
have a lot of nice
Chag
Hanukkah
Sameach.
stuff going on. And next week on to Miketz. That is our final session with Rashi and Friends.
Aw.
Oh, come on.
We'll do. Don't worry. There's more learning to come.
Oh, I'm gonna say before there's another session of something.
So what was that, Carol?
Before there's another session of something.
Yes,
You know,
before there's another
if
session.
things-
Something. Okay,
yeah.
great. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.